The objective in this video would be to bring you up to date with the more innovative ways people prepare job interviews today. And I'm going to talk about 4 such innovations which I was able to connect with successful outcomes. Number 1 here, I believe we agree that interview prep is a pretty emotionally intense experience, right? And nowadays, more and more use influencers to prep their job interview. So if in the past it was more about Dr. Google, nowadays it's more about Professor YouTube. Okay, so people use influencers because they want to boost their motivation to interview. And so you should know there are over 10,000 thank you notes in from FANG candidates on YouTube. So it's definitely a trend which you should consider if this could be helpful to your prep, right? Second thing, like talk about here, second innovation would be the evolution of coaching. Okay, so in the past, coaching was used primarily for executive types of roles, but nowadays with the generalization of behavioral interviews, interview coaching has also become pretty much mainstream, right? And I can confidently tell you that you can connect this interview prep approach with successful outcomes, or at least with significantly improving your interviewing skills, right? Just if I might give you one piece of advice here, your first coach doesn't have to be the best choice, okay? Number 3, cheat sheets. Okay, so the situation is the following. In the past, face-to-face interviews were the norm, okay? And in face-to-face interviews, you could have at best one sheet of paper, which you could call your cheat sheet, with, maybe some notes, maybe some questions for them during the interview. Nowadays, and starting with the pandemic, the digital interviews have become the norm, and it seems like it's a trend here to stay. Okay, and to many candidates, it's inconceivable not to have their cheat sheets prepared for the digital interview these days, when compared to this being a rather isolated scenario in the past. Some candidates even go as far as to read their entire stories from their computer screen, or even their story wall behind their webcam during these job interviews. All right, so I definitely call this an innovation, in the way that people prepare these job interviews, because there's also an emotional aspect to this. It brings you confidence. It gives you a bit more confidence in some cases using this approach. Now, what you may also not know here is that employers adopting this since the pandemic, they have now sufficient information to understand to what degree cheating habits or or to what degree digital interviews are efficient when compared to face-to-face ones. And apparently the results are good enough, so this trend will continue, right? Personally, what I can tell you from my experience as talking to many of US candidates, cheating is often used successfully only by the best candidates. So if you prepare your interview, if you're well qualified for the interview, if you know what you're doing, then, basically having cheat sheets around you during the interview will eventually boost your performance further. Whereas if you're unprepared, your cheat sheets will decline your performance, actually. It can, there's a lot more to talk about. But long story short, cheat sheets, the way you prepare interviews digitally, has significantly evolved. Okay, and the fourth element of innovation I'd like to talk about here would be structured interview prep. Okay, this basically means that in the past, the way most people would prepare job interviews would be to answer the list of most commonly asked questions, right? Whereas nowadays, more and more of you prefer to use a more structured approach, that is to prepare a story bank for your upcoming job interview. Now, I would certainly agree that the story bank concept is not as new. I mean, it's maybe a decade old. However, with the adoption of behavioral interviews, this concept has also become mainstream. And personally, I see far more success these days with people who prepare story banks as I've seen in the past, right? So this trend of structured interview prep is parallel to another trend from HR, structured hiring, which basically means they would employ as many interviews as possible, as structured as possible, in a format which is as structured as possible to make it as equitable as possible and as accurate as they can, right? So structured interview prep is also another trend and another pretty much innovative way to prep your job interviews these days. So these were the 4 elements I'd like to talk about here. Again, the ones that I was able to successfully connect with positive interview outcomes. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.